I pulled a tooth the size of a shot glass out of the wrecked hull of a boat out there, and it was the tooth of a great white.
It was Ben Gardner's boat. It was all chewed up. I helped tow it in. You should have seen him.
Where is that tooth? Did you see it, Brody?
No, I didn't see it. He dropped it.
I had an accident.
Way in.
Look, we depend on the summer people here for our very lives.
You are not going
and
to have
if
a
you
summer
close those
unless you
beaches,
deal
we're
with this
finished.
problem.
We're not only going to have to close the beach, we're going to have to hire somebody to kill the shark.
A great white shark terrorizes a small beach community in the movie that's considered the first summer blockbuster ever. This week, we discuss a great name for a yacht rock band, fake facts that people think are true, and how Brody is like Indiana Jones. We also chat about all the ways this movie is relevant in the age of the coronavirus pandemic before finding out if 1975's Jaws stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Test of Time, the first day of summer 2020 edition. I think this episode drops a little before the first official day of summer, but close enough, whatever. My name is Alan Noah, and who might you be?
I'm James Brief, and I believe the astronomical term you're thinking of is the summer solstice. Is that what you're talking about, Al?
Yes, it is. I am not thinking of the vernal equinox, which... I don't know, which sounds cooler? Summer solstice has the alliteration, but vernal equinox has the cool X sound in there.
Vernal equinox sounds like a band's name.
You could have a band named Summer Solstice.
They'd suck, but like, I'm going to see Vernal Equinox tonight. That's pretty cool. Summer solstice is like, they had one hit like 30 years ago, and like now they're all in their 50s. Oh my God, Summer Solstice is playing the county fair.
They're definitely yacht rock, for sure.
Yacht rock, exactly. You know, I want to say something, Al. One of the qualities I look for in a person I'd be interested in dating, a friend, coworker, especially if I want to hire someone. You know what quality I think is probably the single best quality that a person can have overall? It's probably the best quality a person can have.
Chiseled jawline?
That's number 5.
Oh,
but
okay.
The number one thing is the ability for someone to say, I was wrong about something. And then hopefully correct it. But that ability, and there are people today, people in power, that think the exact opposite, of course, that think it's a weakness to ever say you're wrong about anything.
Right. Cough, cough, Donald Trump looking at you.
No, I'm going to say it was a cast member of Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. It might have been Tim Curry. He might be the kind of person who never admits he's wrong. I'm not going to say who I'm talking about.
Okay, well, I did. Donald Trump.
Okay. Well, the worst part about this, though, is when I have to do it myself. And the thing is, Al, I might have to admit that I might have been wrong. And worse off than that, you might have been right about something.
Oh, I think I know which specific thing you're talking about. Literally every single time we've ever disagreed. Just all of them. Every time we've ever disagreed. It's a wide net. It's a blanket statement. Every time we've ever had a different opinion, I was right and you were wrong. I'm glad you finally come around. That shows tremendous personal growth. I'm proud of you, James. Way to go.
So one of those things that I am now apologizing for is our difference in opinion on how to buy Nintendo Switch games. And me, I'm a purist. I wanted the cartridges for everything. And you were like, no, digital with everything. And I have to admit, there's a couple games that I've downloaded, especially during quarantine, because I don't go out to stores and I didn't want to, why wait for it to come on Amazon? We can get it instantly. And I found it so much more convenient. And it strikes me because Sony recently revealed the PlayStation 5. I know you're not a PlayStation guy, and neither am I really, but did you hear anything about how there's 2 models of the PlayStation 5 coming out?
Yeah, I did. And, I'm not a PlayStation owner. I have never owned PlayStations 1 through 4, but I'm a video gamer, so I check these things out. And yeah, I did see that the PS5 has two models, one with a drive and one that is purely digital. And presumably the one that's just digital will be cheaper. They haven't announced the prices yet. That one is slimmer because obviously it has less hardware. It doesn't need to have the drive, and it's built for games to just be downloaded directly onto it. I mean, that makes sense. You can imagine the GameStop executives like banging their heads on the wall when that announcement was made. That's bad news for them. But I think that's clearly an indication that that's where the industry is going overall.
Yeah, we rarely talk stock tips on this podcast, but sell your GameStop stock. Do not buy GameStop stock.
No, the next generation Xbox, that's just one unit that I believe has a drive, right? I don't think that's digital only.
Well, yeah, I mean, there still is use of discs. I use my Xbox as my Blu-ray player, and there are things about having discs. You don't necessarily need as much space on the hard drive, although today most games are just installed off of the Blu-rays anyway, so it really won't make much of a difference. It'll probably load faster.
Yeah, I mean, we've debated the physical digital thing. It's great to know that you agree that I'm right. I'll tell you, the vast majority of Switch games that I have are digital. I only have, I think, 4 games on cartridge, but it has been annoying lately because 2 of those games are Ring Fit Adventure, the exercise game, which I'm really into. I've been doing a lot of that during quarantine, and Breath of the Wild. And my son's been getting back into Breath of the Wild. And so when he plays that, and then I want to play Ring Fit, and I have to stop and go and find the cartridge, and if he puts the cartridge in the wrong case, and it's so annoying because I have to open it up, and no, it's not that big of a deal. I realize I'm complaining about literally nothing, but it's a lot easier to just go into the software menu and pick which game you want and not have to worry about the cartridge. It's so much easier.
The only bad thing about it is the fact that you can't exchange games, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I downloaded the new Animal Crossing game. I didn't catch on the way the entire internet seemed to have. And I know you were interested in the game, and I would have loved to have just mailed it to you, and I couldn't because it's just tied to my system. So that's kind of annoying. And of course, I do worry, what if I like smash my Switch? Like, can I just download everything again? I think you can. Yeah, I think you can. Okay, so then that's fine, but it won't be the worst thing if it goes all digital, it turns out.
Our friend Mailer, who was on the Shawshank Redemption episode, he was playing a game for Switch that he had, Fire Emblem, and he didn't love it, and he literally did exactly that. He dropped it in the mail and sent it to me, and that was very kind, and thank you, Mailer. I'll be totally honest, I haven't played it, and neither has my son, but I hear you. It is nice to have that option, and the next generation console wars are coming. The PlayStation 5 versus the Xbox Series X. That's right? That's like the stupidest name ever. I think that's what it's called.
There was the Xbox One X, and this one, yeah, it's a ridiculous naming system. They completely messed it up because when the PlayStation 2 came out and there was the Xbox, the PlayStation 3 came out, and they didn't want to call themselves Xbox 2, so they called themselves Xbox 360 to kind of match the PlayStation 3, but then they dropped that naming, and the next one was Xbox One. It's ridiculous.
It's very, very confusing.
I'll just say a last thing on the subject. You want to mail me Fire Emblem?
You want it?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, I'll send that to you. From Mailer to me to you. But let's move on to this week's movie, Jaws. So this is the movie that put Steven Spielberg on the map. This is the movie that is considered the first blockbuster.
Summer blockbuster.
Yes, summer blockbuster. Were there winter, fall, or spring blockbusters before this?
Well, there were blockbusters like Gone with the Wind and those things. Gone with the Wind still to this day is by far the most successful movie of all time, adjusted for today's dollars.
But were they calling it a blockbuster back then? I don't think so. I think the term blockbuster was first coined for Jaws because people were waiting around the block, and that was the first time that ever really happened. And then it happened even more so with Star Wars.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this is a great movie to talk about as summer is beginning. And it's also a great movie to talk about during the pandemic for reasons that we will definitely get to as we start talking about the movie. But just in case you haven't seen the movie in a while, it takes place in the fictional New England beach town of Amity Island. Police Chief Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider, investigates the death of a young swimmer and learns that she was killed by a shark. Brody wants to close the beaches, but Mayor Vaughn overrules him, fearing that the loss of tourist revenue will hurt the town's economy. Does that sound relevant to what we're dealing with right now? Probably. After the shark attacks increase, Brody and shark expert Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, join up with the mysterious Captain Quint, played by Robert Shaw, to kill the deadly great white. So yeah, I know that this was a huge hit. It was a blockbuster. It made a ton of money. It was the #1 grossing movie of all time until Star Wars came out 2 years later. But I'm sure you've got more facts and figures than just that.
The movie did open on June 20th, 1975, and back then the box office records week to week weren't the same as today. It did open at #1 with $7 million. The thing about it is there were so many re-releases of these films because this is before the VHS era. So after a movie is out of theaters, the only way for it to come back is they would just re-release these films over and over, and Jaws just kept getting re-released. I mean, it's a fantastic summer film. So they just kept re-releasing it. And over its entire run, this $7 million film made $260 million domestically and $470 million worldwide. A film from 1975 grossed almost $500 million.
That's a lot of dollars.
Right? And it had an unknown director, an unknown musical composer we haven't mentioned yet, but it's probably the first really famous John Williams score.
I read something today where John Williams said that his work on this movie really opened a lot of doors for him. And obviously he had a very long and successful relationship with Steven Spielberg, but it definitely made a name for him too.
So the film opens with a young woman going skinny dipping while her partner is lying on the beach, and she's going out for a night swim, and it's under the moonlight, it's dark, and we see the woman from the point of view of underneath the water, about maybe 10, 15 feet underwater, and this woman just suddenly just starts screaming in agony, screaming in pain, and then she's suddenly pulled down underwater.
Right. And if you didn't know what the movie was about, which is impossible now and was impossible in 1975 because the movie poster was the giant image of the shark, you might not know exactly what happened right at first. And the story's been told a million times that the mechanical shark named Bruce, and there were a couple of different versions of it, but Spielberg had all these problems with the mechanical shark, so he was kind of forced to not show it, but sort of imply it. And that makes the movie a million times scarier. That's what Hitchcock always did. You know, it was the terror that you didn't see. You wait a while into this movie before you really get a good look at the shark. And this opening scene, this first victim, it's scary. It's freaky because you don't see it.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things that low budget and poor practical effects of the time just forced Spielberg to be creative. But this movie doesn't show you the shark, and Spielberg has made it very clear that was not his intention.
Yeah, it definitely worked out better for Spielberg and the movie and Universal Studios and literally everyone involved. We then meet Brody, Roy Scheider's character, and he is a transplant from New York who's just moved up to New England. They make the New England accent joke of like, oh, where are the kids? They're in the yard. No, you have to say they're in the yard. And he gets a call about the girl who was killed. He has like 2 landlines in his house, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, I guess maybe one is for personal and one is for business. Maybe that's a thing that sheriffs had in 1975. I don't know, but I just thought that was kind of interesting.
No, that's exactly what it was. When I was growing up, my father needed to have phone calls come through when he was on call. He's a surgeon. You didn't have call waiting back then, so you couldn't have busy signals when the hospital was trying to get in. Same thing with the police. If Sheriff Brody's on the phone with a pizza place, police need to break through. So they just install a second line, I'm sure.
Yeah, but then it was a little bit weird because the two phone lines were right next to each other. Brody picks up one and is like, hello? Oh no. And then he grabs the other one, which was, 2 inches away. My dad also had a separate phone line for his business, but it was in another room. Whatever. But pretty quickly, Brody figures out that this was a shark attack. The autopsy says that it was a shark attack. I did notice in the paperwork, there's a really up close shot. It says coroner's office, not coroner's office, which I'm guessing was maybe intentional. I mean, back then they had typewriters. They didn't have spell check. Just watching it, I was like, hey, that doesn't say coroner. It says coroner. And right away, Brody is like, okay, we have to shut down the beaches. We're closing the beaches. He starts going to the beach to tell people that they need to get out of the water because, again, there are no cell phones. He can't just call someone who's down there. He has to physically go there. There's a group of Boy Scouts on the water, but it's okay. None of the Boy Scouts get killed. Brody's able to get there in time. I did notice that one of the things that Brody says to some random person on the beach, he just looks at him and he goes, "That's some bad hat, Harry." And that's a name of a production company. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I have heard of Bad Hat Harry.
Yeah, it's Bad Hat Harry Productions. They do movies and TV shows. I don't remember what used to come on after House, but I used to DVR something where I'd always catch the last 5 seconds of House before the show that I was watching would start, and I would always hear "That's some bad hat, Harry." And apparently they got that from here. So I didn't know that, but there you go. Stupid little worthless piece of trivia for you.
I like that trivia.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. But then we really get into the thing that a lot of people remember about this film and are definitely talking about now in 2020, which is that even though Brody obviously wants to shut down the beach because of the shark, the mayor does not want that to happen. And he goes out of his way to keep the beaches open because he's worried about the economy and tourism and tourists and people spending their money.
Yeah, actually, I had read that in the novel, this is a novel by Peter Benchley. In the novel, the mob actually has a huge investment in Amity Island real estate. So it's actually the mob pressuring the mayor. It winds up being very test of time is that it was just purely the politician who wants to, keep business open, even though he knows there is a killer shark in there.
Yeah, and despite Brody's best intentions and efforts to close the beach, the mayor keeps it open. And then, not surprisingly, a little boy is out in the ocean and he is killed by a shark. And now everyone knows that it's a shark. The mayor really can't deny it at this point. They have a town meeting. And this is where we first meet Quint, who is this angry sea captain who says that he'll go and find the shark and kill him. He wants $10,000. They had been saying that they would offer a $3,000 reward. So obviously Quint is asking for more than 3 times as much money. It is funny, though, the way that Quint gets everyone's attention is he does the nails on the chalkboard thing. And it's become kind of a famous moment of this movie. One, I thought it was a little bit weird that there was a chalkboard in this room. What were they writing on the chalkboard? Diagrams of how to kill a shark or something? Maybe budget numbers?
Well, it's like a community room, so they have a blackboard.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. But something else that I just think is a little bit weird, I've diagnosed it myself, but I'm 99% sure I have misophonia, which is that thing where certain sounds just drive you crazy, and people chewing really loudly or snapping bubble gum or high-pitched whistling, it kills me. I hate it. But weirdly, the sound of nails on a chalkboard doesn't really bother me.
No, it's horrible to me. I did not like that, but that's the effect he wanted. And he kind of looks like, if you know the sea captain from The Simpsons, it's obviously modeled after this guy. I mean, except not likable in any way. Quint is a very disturbed man, and we'll find out why he is as disturbed as he is. But he has this great line where he's telling the folks in the town, like, I value my neck a lot more than $3,000. And he says, I'll find him for 3. But I'll catch him and I'll kill him for 10. And he says, you got to make up your minds. If you want to stay alive, then ante up. If you want to play it cheap, then you can be on welfare the whole damn winter. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, he's cocky, he's arrogant, but he's not wrong, because for that $3,000 reward, every fisherman on the island goes looking for the shark, and surprisingly, some guys actually find and kill a shark. They catch this tiger shark and they're convinced that they got the shark, because how many sharks can there be off of Amity Island? And the mayor is saying, hey, we don't get sharks around here. This is it. We figured it out.
Absolutely. And this is the point in the movie when we meet a shark expert, Matt Hooper, and it's played by young Richard Dreyfuss. And he finds one of the victims and he realizes the bite diameter that killed this woman is not the bite diameter of this tiger shark. He's telling the mayor with no uncertainty, this is not correct. And it was so much of an analogy today. I mean, you had the scientist saying, this is not working. And then you had the politician right next to him saying, no, you're wrong, scientist. We can't have the economy do any bad. You know, it's a kind of thing that had Jaws come out today, or had it come out a year from now, you would kind of go, it's a little bit on the nose to have this mayor. Okay, we get it. Because, I mean, this dialogue, it's almost like the dialogue has been taken from Jaws and used by the talking heads on TV.
Yeah, and it continues, and I think we're going to keep coming back to this theme. Along the lines of the shady politician, while this conversation happens by the body of this tiger shark, the mother of the boy who is killed comes over and slaps Brody in the face and says, this is your fault. I just found out that you knew that there was a shark in the water because of that girl who died, and you didn't do anything about it. Shame on you. And the mayor is standing right there next to him, and he doesn't say a word. He keeps his head down. That mayor accepts no responsibility. He completely lets Chief Brody take the fall. It's pure scapegoating. It's not an important plot point to the movie, but you can almost imagine someone in the mayor's office leaked that information so that everyone would blame Brody and not the mayor. And I mean, like you were saying at the beginning of the episode about people admitting when they're wrong, this mayor has no intention of admitting that he was wrong. He's just going to pin it all on Brody.
Yeah, and Brody, he feels awful about this now. There's a part where he goes home and he's sitting with his wife and pours her a glass of wine, and he takes a full glass, not a wine glass, mind you, but like the tall glass of orange juice kind of glass, and he pours an entire glass of wine and starts drinking it. He's definitely feeling very guilty about what's happened.
In that scene, there's a moment where he is just kind of like holding his cup and holding his head and thinking back on everything. And his son is mimicking him and doing the exact same gestures that his dad is doing. And a lot of Steven Spielberg's movies are about families and fathers and sons. This specific shot reminded me a lot of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. There's a moment where Indy and Short Round sort of have like this exact same thing, you know, and Indy's a father figure to Short Round, and he kind of puts his hands in a certain way, and then Short Round does the exact same thing. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I mean, that's a theme that goes throughout that entire series. It's just like in Indiana Jones, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, when Mutt Williams and Indiana Jones have that back and forth, right, Al?
I don't remember that ever happening, and I don't know what you're talking about. But Hooper had been saying that they should cut open the tiger shark to see if that kid was still in the stomach.
And an easy way to prove it, that they're right or wrong.
Right. And the mayor doesn't want to be proven wrong. So he says, no, I don't want to cut open this shark and look for a little boy's guts in front of everybody, which, okay, you could kind of maybe see that reasoning. Doesn't mean they couldn't do it later somewhere else. But that's exactly what Brody and Hooper decide to do. And there is no little boy in there. There's like a license plate from Florida or something, which is kind of convenient to prove that it's from the South.
That was one of the earliest memories I have of the entire film of Jaws. I just remember that there was a license plate in one of the sharks that they kill.
Right. So then Hooper is like, I was right. That wasn't the real shark. Let's go out and look for the real shark. And Brody hates that idea because also Brody hates the water, which is weird that he moved to an island if he hates the water. But whatever. Don't think about that. And they go out looking for the shark. They end up finding another victim. Hooper goes diving under the water and he finds this giant great white tooth. So now he knows exactly what kind of shark they're dealing with.
They had found an abandoned boat on the surface of the water, and when he's underwater, he holds the tooth, and Hooper suddenly sees the decomposing body of the boat owner, former boat owner, floating by him, and in his panic, he drops the tooth. And they go to the mayor, and they're like, it's a great white. Like, Hooper tells the mayor, all this thing does is eat, swim, and make other sharks. That's all this thing does. It's a killing machine. It is the perfection of evolution. And then the mayor's like, yeah, but you don't have the tooth, do you? Like, as if you really would have believed them if they presented the tooth, but since they didn't have the tooth, he says, you're just trying to make a name for yourself so you can get in National Geographic.
He actually says the National Geographic, which I thought was really funny. You can even see the wheels turning in the mayor's head. I think that actor does a really good job when Hooper says, oh, we found this tooth, and the mayor's like, do you have the tooth? Because he knows that Hooper doesn't have it. If he did have it, he would have said, here, look at this tooth. And he would have been showing it to him. And he's a slime ball. So he's thinking, what would the slime ball move be from their point of view? It would be to pretend that there was a tooth, but then not really have it. And the mayor only cares about business. He cares about the economy. That means more to him than lives. And yeah, once again, it feels so incredibly relevant. I mean, you hear it. You hear people talking about it now of like, oh, I don't want to open up this. I don't want to be the mayor of Jaws, or some idiot governor somewhere says, oh, we're just going to open up businesses again. Coronavirus isn't real. And then people on Twitter are like, yep, there's the mayor from Jaws.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where he's made a miscalculation, because his miscalculation is that the damage to the economy will be worse than children being eaten alive in front of an entire beach of residents and tourists.
Which will also be bad for the economy.
Well, I mean, what did we not want to do in the beginning of the coronavirus? We didn't want to isolate a cruise because that would hurt the numbers or something. A politician's desire to dictate what science is going to do because it's better for their poll numbers doesn't seem to work, because the people are starting to catch on in Jaws, because there's a billboard that starts getting vandalized. Like, it's one of these happy people like beaching it up on Amity Island, and then someone draws in a shark like eating one of them. And because you didn't do anything about this, the mayor was worried that all the tourist dollars are going to go to other places. But no, now instead, Amity Island is going to be known as the Shark Island. This place is probably ruined for 10 years.
Well, right, because what happens next is that it's 4th of July weekend, and this is the busiest weekend of the year for them, and everyone's on the beach, but no one's going into the water. And then the mayor starts pressuring people to go into the water, which seems extra stupid. The people are at the beach. They are in the town. They're going to spend the money on the hotels and the pizza and the ice cream and the souvenirs and all of the things. Who cares if they're swimming or not? The mayor does, apparently. He starts pressuring people to go into the water, and there is another attack. Well, first, it's actually not a real attack. It's a couple of kids playing a joke with like the shark fin on their back, and They just think they're being funny. But then Jaws really does attack. He kills somebody in the little estuary. Brody's son is there. He doesn't get hurt, but he goes into shock. And Brody and the mayor confront each other in the hospital. And Brody's like, you've got to just pay Quint. We've got to end this. The mayor does admit that he's wrong, so he is unlike every Republican politician in 2020 because he eventually does say that he made a mistake. He is smoking in the hospital, which is very, very strange to see someone smoking in a hospital. But that's it. Go hire Quint, get the damn shark.
Yeah, it's like the exact same thing, like these calls for I want rallies, and there will not be any masks because the reason is people don't want anyone to remind themselves of all the danger that's around them. And the mayor's thinking the same thing. Nobody's in the water because everyone's thinking about the shark attacks. And the mayor's correct because the moment a couple people go in the water, everyone forgets about it. Everyone goes in the water and they're splashing and playing. They're actually very happy that it seems, oh, we're allowed to go in the water. That means that coronavirus is done. I mean, the sharks are done now that we can go to the beach again. Like, people really wanted it to be safe. And of course we wanted the beach to be safe of diseases and sharks. But just because someone tells you it's safe and forces you to go there, we learn that is a tragic mistake.
Exactly. And you could also even sort of do the thing that a lot of people are doing now in 2020 when you hear these, oh, well, the numbers are really low and it's just 0.03% and more people die from the flu than from coronavirus, which I don't think is true, by the way. But you just hear that stuff all the time. You can imagine the mayor of Amity Island or someone there saying, 4 people got eaten. When you consider all of the people, that's not too bad. 1 boy got eaten. But hey, there were a lot of people coming into Amity Island on the 4th of July. Overall, the numbers are pretty low. You can imagine that spin.
And where are all these left-wingers that always want to save the sharks and help the sharks? Well, now they're eating and suddenly they're protesting.
Heart attacks kill more people than sharks on Amity Island. Should we close down all the burger joints too? Bleeding hearts.
Do they talk about all the people that didn't die from shark attacks last year? No.
My son told me the other day, he goes, do you know that coconuts kill more people every year than sharks do? And I was like, that can't be right. And I actually looked it up on Snopes, and that's not true. It's one of those things that everyone says because they've heard it a million times, but it's not actually true.
My favorite one of those is the average person swallows 6 spiders a year while they're sleeping. And that was a fact that was created by some social scientists for the express purpose of seeing how quickly that kind of fact would spread.
Really? That's very interesting.
Yeah, total fake fact.
One more fake fact that I know is a fake fact. Half of all marriages end in divorce. That is not true. I remember that from when I worked on a show on Science Channel and we were doing a story about like the science of love and we were going to write that in and we could not verify that. That is not a fact that you can prove with any kind of demographics.
It seems to be a stupid fact anyway, because all marriages, are you talking about like 16-year-olds getting married or 35-year-olds? I'm sure that 16-year-olds getting married, the divorce rate is really, really high. But yeah, certainly the only fact you cannot believe is if your only source is Facebook.
This is very true. But getting back to Jaws, so now Quint and Hooper and Brody go out into the ocean to catch the damn shark. And this is where the movie, I think, kind of slows down a little bit. Apparently, the first 2 acts of the movie are pretty different from the novel, but Steven Spielberg really loved the end of the book where they go hunting for the shark. And apparently, the 3rd act of the movie and the end of the book are a lot more similar.
With a number of exceptions that I'll come to. Well, when we get on the boat, we definitely learn a lot more about these characters. For one thing, Hooper is not just some science nerd. I mean, this guy really knows his stuff on the boat. And Quint is like, you have the hands of someone who's never worked, schoolboy, that typical line. But then Hooper knows all of the knots. You could tell Quint doesn't want to admit that Hooper is not just some college boy, but he's yelling at Sheriff Brody. He's like, Hooper drives the boat. You do what I say. Because he actually realizes Hooper is actually pretty good at what he's doing there. But Quint, he's drinking beer all the time. And there's a great test of time thing. It's the beers he drinks. The cans are the pull tabs. Do you know what those are? I mean, those are before our time.
I feel like you've mentioned them in another episode. Maybe. Well,
it's basically for everyone that's had any can of soda before. You open it up, and that little thing that you bend to break the soda open, that is affixed to the top of the can. But in the 70s and earlier, it was this thing you kind of ripped off, sort of like when you have a can of corn and it has its own little handle on it that you could just pull it and rip the whole thing off.
Yeah.
That's what soda cans had. And it was just kind of like oval shaped, and you ripped that part off and you just threw it away. And think about what those sides of cans are. People would throw away these sharp pieces of metal on the beach, and it was not pleasant. So it was definitely a thing of the past. But every time I see a pull tab can, I think, wow, this is definitely before our era.
Right. Speaking of things before our time, Quint gives a monologue about his time in World War II.
Not just any monologue, Al. In my opinion, I think this might be the greatest monologue in film history. I love Quint's monologue about the USS Indianapolis. It is terrifying. Robert Shaw, the actor who plays Quint, I mean, I really believe this guy was there in this horrible World War II story that he talks about. So this is a fictionalized version of an actual story from World War II, the USS Indianapolis. There were 1,192 crewmen aboard, and only 316 survived. Most of them died from exposure, dehydration, and there were some shark attacks. But the monologue that Brody talks about is about how they were on this secret mission, so no one even knew that they were gone when they went into the water. Like 1,000 men were in the water, and over the course of 5 days, these sharks slowly started picking them off one at a time, and he swam to one of his buddies, and then he thought he was sleeping, but then he realized it was only half of his body. In my opinion, it's a terrifying and just brilliantly acted monologue. Monologues are very difficult to do and to keep your attention. And this monologue's like 3.5 minutes long. And I just think it's one of the best monologues I've ever seen.
And apparently it's a matter of debate about who wrote this monologue because 17 different people worked on this script. I'm exaggerating. But Robert Shaw tweaked it apparently. And it's up for debate how much he tweaked it and how much he wrote of it. But you get the feeling that for him, killing this shark is personal. And then the shark appears. Throughout the movie, anytime the shark attacks, you hear that classic John Williams theme. But when the shark attacks on the boat, you don't hear the theme. There's no warning whatsoever. It just happens. And you, the audience member, are as surprised as the characters. And this is when you have that iconic line, you're going to need a bigger boat. When they finally get a good look at this shark, and it is huge. Even for a great white, they say it's 3 tons and what did they say, 40 feet? Something like that?
Hooper says 20 feet long, and Quint says 25, and 3 tons on him.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, this thing is terrifying. And so they have an idea. I mean, you can't just like shoot this thing with a spear. They decide they're going to first just track it, and they're going to shoot it with a spear, but the spear is attached to a rope, and the rope is attached to these huge floating barrels. And eventually they even shoot the shark with 3 barrels. And this shark is so strong, it is able to swim underwater and pull 3 air-filled barrels underwater, and you assume hundreds of feet down or something, because they don't rise for like another 30 seconds. This is a strong shark.
Right, and Quint says, like, there's no way he can dive with 3 barrels. There's no way. Like, he was surprised when it dove with 1 and then 2, but with 3, he's like, it's just not possible. But then that's exactly what happens.
Right, because the thing I love about this character is when we first meet him, this guy has been terrified of sharks for, I guess now 30 years. And when we see his house on the shore, it is filled with shark trophies, the jaws of sharks that he's killed. I mean, this guy is obsessed. The moment this woman is killed, he knows exactly what they're dealing with. And he knows that these little local fishermen with the little tiger shark they killed, no. You need someone like me, and it's going to cost you. And he knows exactly what's going on. And then he sees Jaws, and then there is this close-up on Robert Shaw. And for a moment, he doesn't let Brody see it or Hooper see it, but Quint is terrified.
Right. And the whole idea of shooting the shark with the barrels, which seems brilliant, is just not working. So Hooper has another plan, which is to go into this cage, and he's going to inject the shark with a sedative, a poison, something, and everyone else thinks this is a crazy idea. Even actually Hooper thinks it's a terrible idea, but he goes into the cage, and he's lowered down into the water, and the shark attacks the cage, and somehow, miraculously, Hooper is able to escape. And there's a reason that they did that.
A big difference between the book and the film, there's a couple things. For one thing, Hooper actually winds up having an affair with Brody's wife. It doesn't have anything to do with the plot, so they kind of just eliminated that. But the other thing is that Hooper dies in the novel and in the original screenplay. Again, the same way that this mechanical shark wasn't working, they actually had an idea where they tried to put a dummy, which actually makes sense. You can make very easily a mannequin for scuba diving. They want to put a dummy inside of a steel cage, and then some of the shark wranglers were going to entice some sharks to attack the cage, and basically it would be footage of Jaws destroying Hooper. But they never could get the sharks to attack the cage, and one time that they got this brilliant shot of the shark destroying the cage, the Hooper dummy had like fallen out or something, so the best footage they had was of the shark attacking this completely empty cage. So Spielberg decided to change the ending and say, oh, somehow Hooper's going to escape from the cage and then hide on the bottom of the ocean for about 10 minutes, and we're going to have this great shot of how Hooper escaped just in time before the shark completely just destroys this cage.
It's funny how the real life footage impacted the plot of the movie. It is a little bit weird that like Hooper just kind of disappears for the climactic battle against the shark, and then you never really get where he was, how he survived, why he didn't come up to the surface sooner to, help out, like what was he doing?
You clearly saw him swim to the bottom and hide behind a little coral reef. But what did you think he was going to do? How was he going to help? I mean, the guy, he dropped his spear. He is a piece of meat floating outside of a boat that is, like, sinking, by the way. Jaws has now been attacking the boat, and he's biting it so much that the back of the boat starts sinking, and Brody and Quint are hanging on, but suddenly Jaws takes another bigger bite. The boat dips up at a higher angle, and Quint just slips, and he looks Brody in the eye, Brody looks Quint in the eye, and there's this look of terror. Brody reaches out his arm to try to save Quint, but it's too late. And can you imagine you've had nightmares about sharks for the last 30 years, and then finally this guy meets his end by being devoured by the epitome of his nightmares? It's, I guess you could almost say, a fitting end for him, but the poor guy has had too many encounters with sharks in his life.
I mean, one, I would think, would be too many encounters with sharks. But yeah, I mean, this death is the most brutal and the most graphic, and certainly the one where you, the audience, see the most, and it's pretty terrifying. So now it's all up to Brody, and there are these tanks of pressurized air that Hooper has brought on board because he's brought, those and the cage and the sedative and all of his high-tech equipment, and the shark bites the canister of compressed air, and Brody is trying to shoot it. And he's like, oh, I'm going to shoot it. I'm going to shoot it. I just got to get the good shot. And, he's a chief of police, so he knows his way around a gun. And he has an action movie one-liner. He says, smile, you son of a bitch. He fires, and the shark explodes. And there are other ways they could have killed the shark, but this is a pretty satisfying way to kill the shark.
Oh, yeah, and I don't know if you ever saw the Mythbusters episode where they totally destroyed the myth of this. They said at best maybe his head would explode, but definitely not a huge grenade explosion, but it doesn't matter. It's one of those things that you're very satisfied that this evil killing machine is now dead and blown up.
Whoa, evil? That's a harsh judgment call. I mean, he's a killing machine.
Yeah, you're right. That's actually a good point. You can make the argument that in Jaws 4, The Revenge, it is personal, because the tagline is, this time it's personal.
Sure, I guess so. But after the shark is blown up, then Hooper shows up and is like, hey, can I help? No, we got it. Thanks for literally nothing. And the two of them just sort of like doggy paddle on a piece of the boat, because that's all that's left, and they just head back to shore. You assume they make it. Brody's back in Jaws 2, but you don't see that they survive. You don't see that they make it. Then the movie just kind of cuts to a shot of Amity Island and roll credits. It's a little ambiguous there.
I don't think it's ambiguous. They're swimming towards shore.
But how many miles are they away?
It doesn't matter. They're on a raft. They'll make it.
How do they know which way the shore is?
There is this huge ball of hydrogen that they can look up and see where that big ball of hydrogen is. And since they're off the coast of Massachusetts, they pretty much can go towards that direction.
Okay, fine. Well, that brings us to the end of Jaws. James, what do you think? Does this movie stand the test of time?
Well, I'll say one thing about this film. This is the kind of film that has become sort of a joke in that the sequels are very, very poor. Well, Jaws 2, I think, gets mild reviews, and I've seen it. I believe it's just kind of like a worse version of this. Brody repeats the "smile, you son of a bitch" line. But,
really?
Yeah, but then Jaws 3, which was Jaws 3D, that took place in like a SeaWorld kind of place. And then Jaws 4, The Revenge. That, I believe, is a movie about Brody's wife. By now, Brody is dead. And Brody's son, the guy from this film, he's now like working in the ocean something. And then Jaws like seeks out Brody's son and kills him. So then the family goes, they're like, oh, we have to get away from Amity Island. They move to the Caribbean, and Jaws follows them to the Caribbean.
But it's not like the same Jaws from this movie. It's like that Jaws' son, right?
it's implied that it's after their family. It's a weird film. There's a fantastic Michael Caine quote because he's in the Jaws 4, and someone once asked him, "Have you ever seen that film? Like, it's so horrible." And he replied, "No, I actually haven't seen it, and I've heard it's quite horrible. But I've lived in the house that film bought me for 30 years, and that house is spectacular." So,
well then,
I always thought that was a great reply by Michael Caine. That being said, about Jaws 1, yes, this film stands up so much because of the political themes of 2020. Watching this film, I couldn't believe how much parallels there were to what's going on today. That being said, I think a little bit different than what you were thinking. When you said the third act slows it down, I love the third act, but I was thinking that the first two acts were going to be really slow, but surprisingly, it was really not. The movie's 2 hours and 4 minutes, and that's not a short film, but I thought it was very smooth. I thought the film was very scary. I jumped when Hooper was underwater and you suddenly saw this decomposed body come into his view. I was genuinely scared by these parts. We didn't talk about it, but there was a fisherman earlier in the film that falls into the ocean and he's swimming against Jaws, and there's a race, and I was just totally assuming this guy was dying, and he doesn't die, but it's incredibly tense to see whether he dies, because I was like, oh, it's going to be good and bloody. Speaking of which, every time someone dies, there's like 10 gallons of blood that seem to fill the ocean, which is also incredibly scary. The fact that he kills kids in this film, I mean, that's a level that a lot of films don't go into. And not to mention John Williams, greatest composer of in our lifetime. The score is so great. The movie is great. Spielberg he did such a great job. The acting is fantastic. The monologue, if you don't want to see this film, you can just watch the USS Indianapolis monologue. It's great. So for me, Jaws does stand the test of time. What do you think, Al? Does Jaws stand the test of time?
Oh, yeah, 100% this movie stands the test of time. As we have been saying repeatedly, of course it stands the test of time now when every Republican elected official, yeah, I said it, okay, fine, maybe some Democrats too, but so many politicians now sound like the mayor from Jaws. It's a thing. It's a meme. People are constantly saying it on Twitter and Facebook of like, oh, this mayor is like the real life mayor from Jaws. Some people have actually said, we're keeping things shut down from coronavirus. I'm not the mayor from Jaws. I mean, it's that entwined in our vernacular, and also just sharks being called Jaws, and the Jaws theme is so iconic. I will disagree with you about the score for this movie being legendary. I listened to the soundtrack earlier today. Overall, the score is fine. I don't think it's John Williams' best work. There are parts in the movie where I thought the music was not great. Some of it's fine, but the theme is unbelievable. I mean, it is so simple and it is absolutely iconic. I mean, it's really one of his greatest themes.
Yeah, I will correct myself. When I said the soundtrack, you're absolutely right. I don't remember anything from the soundtrack. I meant the theme. The theme is just brilliant. It's scary and it just works so well.
Yeah, and it's very simple. It's a handful of basses and celli, which is the plural of cello, the tuba and everything. It's phenomenal. The acting is great. The shark looks real when it needs to look real. When it's actual real footage of a shark, that looks great. When you don't see it, it is more terrifying because of it. This is Spielberg learning a lot of lessons, but also like getting a lot of stuff right. There are all kinds of stories about how this movie went way over budget and way over schedule. It went over 100 days over schedule, which is unheard of. And you should never film a movie on the ocean. And Spielberg was a young director who figured, I can do it. Won't be a problem. But he had a ton of problems with the filming. But the finished product is amazing. This movie's won Oscars. It's in the Library of Congress for preservation. I mean, it is just one of the most iconic movies ever, and 100% it stands the test of time. I mean, I wish that some of the themes about staying open when you very clearly should close were not so relevant right now. I wish there were more people who actually learned a lesson from this movie instead of looking at it like, oh, well, that mayor of Amity Island, he actually did a pretty good job. Only one kid got eaten. Like, oh, no, that's not the takeaway. That is going to hurt Amity Island's economy in the future. How many victims are there of the shark? There's the girl in the beginning. There's the little boy. There's the guy in the estuary. There's the fishing corpse that they see. And then there's Quint. That's 5. There's only 5 people that Jaws kills.
That we see him kill.
That we see, right. But we do also see, like, boatloads of people and tourists showing up at Amity Island. So percentage-wise, it's very small. It's a very low number. Meanwhile, of course, the economy for Amity Island is destroyed from there on out because who wants to go there?
You know what else I remember seeing in that beach scene was when the shark started attacking, everyone was for themselves. Did you see that? There were people throwing kids off of floats to take it themselves. I mean,
yes,
it was one of those. I mean, I remember seeing when it was in the beginning, you'd see stories of someone purchasing every piece of meat in the supermarket while the people behind them had nothing. Someone couldn't just give them, like, here's a couple hot dog packs.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I wish this movie wasn't so timely right now, but it is. And even if we had watched this movie, 2 years ago, I'm sure we would have still emphatically said that it stands the test of time. This is a classic.
Who's not a huge fan of this film is, I don't know if he's not a fan of the film, but he is actually not a huge fan of the novel and the film in general, and that's Peter Benchley, the author of Jaws. It's not that he hates his novel. He's felt very guilty that his novel and the subsequent film has made sharks into this terrifying creature for people when there's a lot of terrifying animals in the ocean, but he felt that so many sharks were killed and people wanted shark teeth and hunting them because of this film. So in his later life, he became a shark preservationist.
Good for him.
So for me, I say 100% of Roy Scheider films that I've seen stand the test of time on this podcast. Al, you're 50-50.
Right. You've also said yes to every Spielberg movie we've done. I said no to Hook and Close Encounters.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's true. I've said yes to every Richard Dreyfuss Spielberg film as well.
That's true.
So let me ask you something. This is going to be a little hint for the film I want to review next week, but I saw once a t-shirt. I thought this t-shirt was awesome. It was a t-shirt that had the words, "Walkin' with Jesus." And what do you think the t-shirt showed?
Christopher Walken.
And Jesus. Yeah,
okay.
So I was walking with Jesus. So Christopher Walken. I wanted to review a Christopher Walken film. I don't know if you've ever seen this film. It's an old film from the early 80s based on a Stephen King novel called The Dead Zone.
Is that the one with the gazebo?
Yes, there is a gazebo in the film.
Yes, then I have seen that one. And cool, we haven't done a Christopher Walken movie. Oh, no, we did see Christopher Walken in True Romance. But we haven't seen Christopher Walken in his starring role. And you don't want to miss that episode, so subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and SoundCloud and Stitcher or wherever you're listening to us. Write us a review on Apple Podcasts. Talk to us at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Let us know your thoughts on Jaws. Let us know how you feel about people acting like the mayor from this movie in real life in 2020. And we will see you next time, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.